Welcome to the Renaissance Spirit.
Salve, my beloved posterity. You're here to understand me, aren't you? Who I really was. Marcus Coccius Nerva, Emperor of Rome. If you're expecting some epic saga of bloodthirsty conquest or maniacal ambition, brace yourself for disappointment. For that, you'll need to watch my predecessor Domitian in his video. My life, dear viewer, began far more humbly in the year 30 AD, a date that would ring utterly unremarkable had I not eventually found myself wearing the purple. Not exactly the kind of thing the gods themselves would herald with omens, right? Yet here we are, born into a wealthy family in Narnia, no. Not that magical wardrobe world, the Roman town just north of Rome. I was hardly born for obscurity. The Coxei were an established family with a penchant for political maneuvering, a skill I inherited not out of passion but, well, necessity. My father held consular rank and my uncle? Oh, just a pal of the Emperor Tiberius. Let's just say power flowed around my family like a river of molten gold. Dangerous to dip into, but impossible to resist. As for my youth, you'd be hard-pressed to find anything particularly scintillating. No gladiatorial combats for little Nerva, no wars to march off to, just the usual. The finest Roman tutors, mastering Greek philosophy, which is just a fancy way of saying I was good at arguing, and navigating the labyrinth of familial expectations. There was a certain cold detachment to it all, as though I was a political figure before I could even speak. Ah, and the family dinners? If you've ever wondered how one learns to make diplomacy look effortless, spend an evening with a group of political schemers sharpening their conversational daggers over roast boar. My mother, sharp as a dagger herself, never missed a chance to remind me that our family's fate rested on alliances, not on foolish notions like honor or principle. Yet somehow my heart held on to those very notions, even when I wasn't supposed to. But don't let this charming beginning fool you into thinking mine was a tale of a silver-spooned emperor rising smoothly to power. No, there's much more treachery and tragedy to come, and my eventual reign. Let's just say that the road to Rome is paved with irony. Next, we'll venture into the quagmire of Roman politics, where I found myself not only surviving, but rising through the ranks. And so it begins. The political world of Rome, let me tell you, it's not for the faint of heart or the overly idealistic. Perhaps that's why I found it so distasteful, yet simultaneously irresistible, like staring at a rotting carcass while convincing yourself it's a feast. My early career was more a series of fortunate events or misfortunes, depending on how you look at it, than any grand pursuit of power. You see, in the world of Roman politics, it's not always about ambition. Sometimes you rise because you're the only one left standing in the wake of catastrophe. My early posts? Glorified pencil pushing. Quaestor, praetor, a sprinkling of meaningless appointments under the reign of Nero, yes. That Nero. You'd think being in the inner circle of a tyrant would grant some sense of security. But Nero was like a wild animal, beautiful to behold but deadly unpredictable. One wrong word, one glance of dissatisfaction, and, well, let's just say I knew many men who had their heads on their shoulders one day and their corpses paraded the next. Somehow I survived. I bet you think I played the game well, that I outsmarted the likes of Nero, Vespasian, and Domitian. Hardly. The truth? I kept my head down. I wasn't bold like those lunatics who thought they could wield the sword of Damocles without consequence. I was clever, perhaps even cunning, but mostly I was quiet. Rome was a beast that devoured the loudest among us. Silence was my armor. Yet the thing about Rome's beast is that it has an insatiable hunger for new rulers, especially when the last one leaves a foul taste. By the time Domitian met his end stabbed in his palace, no less it became clear that someone else had to take the reins. Someone moderate, someone without the stench of tyranny or the sparkle of ambition. I imagine the Senate looking around like a group of senators scrambling to find the least offensive choice in a pit of wolves. Who could they turn to? A man nearing 70, well past his prime, more interested in literature and philosophy than conquest or oppression. Enter Nerva, a placeholder, a safe choice. There I stood, one of the last old men in a city of dangerous youths. But I digress. You see, my ascension to the throne wasn't a triumph. It was a necessity, a reluctant appointment. I didn't rise to power. I was thrust into it, almost as if Rome, tired of its chaotic emperors, finally sighed and said, "Fine, give us the old man. He'll do." I suppose I should have been flattered, but in my heart, I knew the truth. I wasn't wanted. I was needed. What followed next was a reign that would inevitably be compared to Domitian's madness. But how does one govern an empire after the reign of a tyrant? With trepidation, wisdom, and the sense that at any moment the knives could turn on me too. But we'll get to that in due time. Next up, my reign, a delicate dance of reform and survival. So there I was, Emperor of Rome. The Senate was relieved, the people cautiously optimistic, and the Praetorian Guard, well, let's just say they had their reservations. Comparisons to Domitian? Unavoidable. After all, I was the man who followed the mad tyrant who had turned Rome into his personal playground of paranoia and terror. While Domitian ruled with an iron fist, I, Nerva, had to somehow steady the ship without being drowned by the chaos he'd left in his wake. What had changed since Domitian's reign? Oh, quite a bit on the surface, at least. The assassination stopped, for one. I wasn't in the business of purges or paranoia. My style? Quiet, almost invisible reform. While Domitian ruled through fear, I governed through trust, or at least the illusion of it. But make no mistake, ruling an empire requires more than just being the nice guy after the tyrant. I had to play a careful game of balancing the Senate, the army, and the people, all while pretending that I wasn't slowly sinking under the weight of it all. But it wasn't all peace and moderation. Oh no, the Praetorian Guard, still loyal to Domitian's memory, practically growled with discontent. They wanted vengeance for their fallen emperor, and they made no secret of their resentment toward me. What a joy it is to rule with a dagger at your back, right? The Guard wasn't pleased that I didn't immediately turn Rome into a bloodbath, avenging their lost tyrant with swift executions of his enemies. But, dear viewer, I was no Domitian. I chose not to rule by fear, but by wisdom. At least, that's what I told myself. Perhaps my greatest challenge, and here's where the story gets a bit tense, was the struggle to maintain my power without losing my head. The senators praised me for my clemency, for restoring a semblance of liberty, but I knew better. The Senate, my dear political allies, had their own agendas, their own ambitions. In reality, I was their emperor in name only. If I didn't play my cards right, they'd have replaced me with a puppet before my bones had cooled in the ground. And yet, there were moments of genuine change, where I believed I could steer Rome towards something better. I repealed Domitian's oppressive taxes, restored confiscated properties, and tried to mend the empire's fractured morale. But at every turn there was resistance. I could sense the weight of Domitian's shadow looming over me, a constant reminder that no matter what I did, it might never be enough to cleanse the empire of his stain. The climax of my reign, of course, was my decision to adopt a successor, an unspoken admission that I wasn't long for this world. The Praetorians were already sharpening their knives, and I knew that if I didn't act, chaos would engulf Rome once again. And so I chose Trajan, a seasoned general with the respect of the legions. Not a choice from the heart, mind you, but from necessity. Trajan was everything I wasn't, young, strong, decisive. He was the emperor Rome needed, and I knew it, but even as I passed the torch, I couldn't help but wonder, had anything really changed? Was I just a brief interlude between two storms? Perhaps, but I still had my role to play, and play it I did quietly, cautiously, and with the full knowledge that Rome, for all its grandeur, was teetering on the edge. And yet, this wasn't the end. Not for me. The end would come soon enough, violently, of course. But for now, I would hold the empire together with sheer force of will, even if I knew it was only temporary. Next, we'll discuss that inevitable end. My death, the last act in a drama I never quite asked to be part of. Stay tuned for the final curtain. Death the one true certainty, even for an emperor. My end was neither glorious nor tragic. Rather, it was inevitable, like the turning of the seasons, though perhaps with a bit more irony. The year was 98 AD, and I, Emperor Nerva, the so-called stabilizer of Rome, was approaching my final moments. How does one prepare for death after a reign like mine? I suppose you don't really. You just wait for the Praetorians to stop glaring, for the Senate to stop whispering, and for the gods to finally take you. In the end, it was none of these that claimed me, but rather nature itself. Of course, history rarely remembers an emperor who dies quietly. Domitian met his end by a blade, and Nero by his own hand. But me, I simply fell ill, grew weak, and faded out like a flickering lamp. There's a cruel poetry in it, isn't there? A man who ruled an empire, responsible for the lives of millions, reduced to a frail old body, betrayed not by enemies, but by time itself. Where's the drama in that, I ask you? Where's the grand farewell? None came. I should have been relieved. But even in my final days, I felt the tension in the air. Rome was never quiet, never at peace. And as I lay in my bed, I knew I was leaving the empire in the hands of a man who might not suffer from my weaknesses, but would face his own battles. Trajan, my chosen successor, would be the emperor Rome wanted. They would adore him as they never did me. But as I lay there, breath growing shallow, I asked myself, did it matter? Would they even remember me? But here's the twist. In death, I finally became what I could never be in life necessary. The people could now speak kindly of me. This old man who, for a brief moment, kept the empire from falling apart. In hindsight, I became something I never sought. A martyr of moderation, a symbol of stability in an age of chaos. As the fever consumed me, and the weight of the empire lifted from my shoulders, I wondered, had I really saved Rome? Or had I merely delayed the inevitable? Either way, it was no longer my concern. Death, in its cold indifference, had freed me. The last breath escaped me, and with it, my reign ended quietly, without fanfare or spectacle. But here's the kicker: death is rarely the final chapter. As soon as I was gone, the whispers started. Would Rome remember Nerva as a bridge between tyranny and glory, or as an irrelevant figurehead? Only time could tell, but I wasn't around to witness it. And honestly, maybe that's for the best. I'd already lived through enough irony. Next, we'll talk about what came after my legacy, if you can call it that. Did my brief reign leave a mark on history, or did the tides of time wash me away, as they do so many others? The great question of every ruler. But for me, let's just say, I've got some thoughts. So, here we are, my legacy. It's a funny word, isn't it? It implies something grand, something lasting, and yet if history teaches us anything, it's that most legacies are more like footprints in the sand here for a moment, then washed away by the next tide. My reign, short as it was, left an imprint on Rome. The real question is, did it matter? In the grand scheme of things, I'm not exactly topping the list of Rome's most memorable emperors, am I? No. You don't see crowds flocking to statues of Nerva or poets singing my praises. What I left behind wasn't glory, conquest, or infamy. It was stability. After the storm of Domitian's reign, I was the calm, the pause, the deep breath Rome needed. I didn't conquer new lands or build towering monuments to my name. I wasn't the iron-fisted ruler who imposed his will upon the empire. But I was the man who set the stage for a new chapter in Rome's history, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Look at what followed after me. Trajan, the emperor who expanded the empire to its greatest extent. I'll admit that part stings a little. He's remembered as the guy, the warrior, the builder, the one who took Rome to heights I never could. But here's a little secret. None of it would have been possible if I hadn't taken that first step. You don't get Trajan without Nerva. It's like needing a solid foundation before building a magnificent palace. And that's what I was, the foundation. Of course, history doesn't get excited about foundations. We like our emperors dramatic, larger than life, sweeping into battle with a sword in one hand and a grand vision in the other. I was none of that. But what I gave Rome, however small or understated, was the gift of balance. I reigned in the chaos, I restored a semblance of freedom, I brought an end to the terror of Domitian's reign. Perhaps I didn't rule long enough for anyone to truly appreciate it, but I'd like to think there's a certain nobility in ruling just enough to restore hope, but not enough to invite hubris. But legacy is a tricky thing. Will anyone really remember me a century from now? 1,000 years? Maybe not, but I take comfort in this. While I didn't leave behind grand monuments, I did leave behind something far more important, a precedent. I reminded Rome that it didn't need tyrants to survive, that sometimes the best thing a leader can do is step aside, create stability, and prepare for the future rather than clinging to power. Ironic, isn't it? The man who never sought power, never desired to rule, ended up showing Rome that restraint could be more powerful than ambition. Maybe my legacy isn't about what I did, but about what I didn't do. And for that, I'm content. But the final question remains. Was it worth it? All the stress, the intrigue, the sleepless nights with a dagger hovering behind me, did it make any difference? Was my reign, brief as it was, worth it? We'll explore that next. And if you think you've figured out my answer already, well, don't be so sure. There's always one last twist in the tale. Stay tuned. So here we are, the grand finale. Was it worth it? Did I, Nerva, Emperor of Rome, make a lasting impact? Or was my reign merely a fleeting moment in the long history of the empire? After all, I was no Augustus, no Trajan. My reign was short, my ambitions even shorter. But does that mean my time on the throne was in vain? It's a question that has lingered in my mind, even in death. Let me take you on one last journey through my thoughts, my reflection on power, equality, liberty, and the burden of ruling a fractured empire. First, let's talk about power. It's intoxicating, they say, though I never quite understood why. In my experience, power is more a curse than a blessing, a weight that presses down on the soul until you're nothing but a shadow of yourself. When I ascended to the throne, it wasn't out of desire, but necessity. The Senate chose me because I was safe, moderate, predictable. And perhaps that's why I was the right man for the time. Rome didn't need another Domitian, drunk on power and ruling through fear. It needed a leader who understood the fragility of the empire, someone who could preserve what was left of its soul. But there's a deeper truth here. Power, for all its allure, is empty without equality, without justice. And that's what I tried to restore, however briefly, during my reign. I wasn't interested in expanding the empire or stamping my name on grand buildings. No, I focused on restoring liberty, on giving the Senate and the people a voice again after years of tyranny. Was it perfect? Hardly. But in a time when democracy felt like a fading memory, I tried to remind Rome that freedom and equality mattered. Even an emperor can't ignore that forever. Did I succeed? Maybe not in the way I had hoped. But perhaps my reign wasn't about grand victories or sweeping reforms. Maybe it was about planting the seeds of something better. After all, isn't that the true purpose of leadership? Not to claim the glory for yourself, but to lay the groundwork for others to flourish. Trajan, the great emperor who followed me, wouldn't have been able to achieve what he did if I hadn't first steadied the ship. I handed over an empire on the brink of chaos and made sure it survived. If nothing else, I was the bridge between tyranny and greatness. Now, as I reflect from beyond the grave, I can't help but wonder, is that enough? I believe so. My reign, as short and uneventful as it may seem, was worth it because it reminded Rome of its core values: liberty, equality, and the pursuit of justice. Those are the ideals that transcend any emperor, any regime, any moment in history. They're what keep an empire alive long after its rulers have been forgotten. So as I stand in judgment of myself, I'll say this: my reign was worth it. Not because of what I did, but because of what I left behind, a sense of balance, a hope for a fairer Rome. I didn't have the luxury of time or grand ambitions, but I played my part in the grand play that is Roman history. I chose to rule with restraint rather than force, and in doing so, I allowed Rome to heal, even if only for a moment. Now, dear viewer, as you ponder the legacy of this reluctant emperor, I invite you to experience the echoes of Rome for yourself. Walk through the streets of the ancient city, visit the Forum, the Palatine Hill, and the sites where history was made. Hold a Roman coin in your hand and feel the weight of centuries, the legacy of emperors who, like me, tried, however imperfectly, to steer the empire toward greatness. Perhaps in those moments, you'll understand what it means to rule, not for power, but for the people. Thank you for watching, my friends. Our channel, The Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to the pursuit of a just, equitable, and humane world. We explore the intersection of history, politics, philosophy, and personal development, examining society and culture through the lens of the past, especially ancient Rome, a civilization that offers profound lessons for our modern world. We celebrate the Renaissance's golden age of knowledge, which birthed the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason. By embracing truth and compassion, we can better steward the earth and our shared humanity. The Renaissance spirit isn't just a philosophy. It's a way of living, learning, and growing. So please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this journey with us. Explore the other videos on our channel, leave your thoughts in the comments, and let us know what you'd like to see next. And before you go, why not take the quiz to see if you truly are a Renaissance spirit? Viva Renaissance Spiritus! History has not died, only our understanding of it. But now it's your turn, carry the torch.